2024 Hawaii Cannabis Expo Legislative Panel. My name is Will Espero. I'll be your moderator. I am a former lawmaker. I served 19 years in the legislature. And I think my most significant impact was being a part of the 2015 team that passed the medical cannabis bill. And thank you. But today we have 4 individuals who have been very supportive of cannabis in one way or another. And these individuals, if anything is passed this session, these individuals will be key players in crafting any legislation or amendments or additions or whatever the case may be. Whether it's medical cannabis, hemp, legalization, or whatever else is out there. So let's start by introducing our panelists. From the Hawaii State Senate, she represents District 2, Puna, the Big Island. She's chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, State Senator Joyce and Buenaventura.
Thank you, Will. Like Will and Della, we are the pioneers, I think, here of passing the dispensary law that finally passed the Hawaii.
Yes. And we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, so it's really fitting that the 3 of us who have are still here today, and I seem to be surrounded by representatives. Well, rightfully so, because the Senate, for those who have been following, have always passed the cannabis bills and somehow have sort of died in the House. So it's kind of fitting that the House members who are supportive are here, because we really need to have it pass the House, and the Senate President would tell you, we've got 23 out of 25 of the senators who will be voting this out. We need the House to step up to the plate. Because it's about time. Hawaii was the first state to legalize medical marijuana, the first state. And it seems to me we're going to be one of the last to actually pass small possession recreational. Hopefully, this would be the year that we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Senator. And on the far left, we have Representative Della Belatti. She represents District 26, which is the Makiki Punch Bowl area, and she's the chair of the House Health and Homeless Committee. Representative Belatti.
All the conversations we're going to have this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. And next to Representative Bellati, from the west side, representing District 45, Waianae Makaha, and he's the chair of the Agriculture and Food Systems Committee, Representative Cedric Gates.
Hello, everyone.
And last but surely not least, from the Big Island, District 8, he represents many areas, Hawi, Halaula, Waimea, Makahalau, Waikiki, Waikoloa, Kamaihai, and Mahukan, the chairman of the important Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs Committee, and he's also the main introducer of HB 2600, which could be a vehicle for legalization, Representative David Tarnas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Now, these are your champions. These are your advocates at the state legislature. If you ask 100 people their opinion on cannabis, you'll get 100 opinions. So you may not agree with what everyone says or thinks, just like a lot of people didn't agree with the medical cannabis bill we passed in 2015. But the point is, it was a starting point. And so today we're here to listen to what our lawmakers have to say, see what's on their mind, and as the legislative session progresses, it's going to be important that you keep in touch with these individuals. They all have emails. And more importantly, contact your own lawmaker. Okay? That's how we're going to get things passed. And sometimes it takes longer than normal, but this is as good a year as any that we can get a legalization bill passed. We'll see. And just briefly, as everyone knows, cannabis has been around for thousands of years. Thousands of years. It was used in Asia, Europe, in the Americas, and used for recreation, spiritual, and medicinal. For thousands of years.
Yes.
It wasn't until American industrialists, for the sake of greed and economic gain, they shut down the cannabis industry. First by taxing it in the 1940s, and that taxation eventually led to the ban. And it was individuals who wanted to make money in other industries. William Hearst, for example. He owned forests and made paper that competed with hemp. And hemp is a better paper than tree paper because hemp doesn't yellow, and you could grow more on an acre of hemp than an acre of trees. And the harvesting time is quicker. But he was one of those who worked with others to kill the cannabis industry. Lamont DuPont. Lamont DuPont, the DuPont company. And one of their products that they were working on, nylon. And what does nylon compete with? Hemp, cannabis, clothing, and other materials. Then you have Andrew Mellon. Now these are all people from the 30s and 40s. Andrew Mellon was the Secretary of Treasury under President Hoover. And he owned the 6th largest bank, and he was the primary banker, by the way, to who? DuPont. But remember Henry Ford, he wanted to build a car out of hemp, using hemp, and use hemp to fuel the vehicle. And that scared the hell out of a lot of these people. Okay? That's again part of why they shut it down. And Harry Anslinger, he worked for President Hoover. He was first appointed to the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And he, by the way, was Andrew Mellon's. The niece was married. Andrew Mellon's niece was married to Harry Anslinger. So you can see how these rich, wealthy industrialists and government officials banded together to destroy the cannabis and marijuana industry. And it was based on lies. It was based on what we call today fake news. Because William Hearst, what else is he known as? Newspapers. And he put the lies and propaganda and rhetoric in his newspapers. And Harry Anslinger, when he was testifying to Congress, used much of what was in these newspapers to testify and kill the cannabis industry. So you can see that if this had never been done, this world would certainly be a different place, especially when it comes to energy and fuels. But we're here today to try to take this process full circle. And by the way, racism was also a big part of what they were saying in the 40s. Racism against the blacks, Hispanics, Filipinos, in order to scare the white population. Just the facts. And if you even look at what's happening now, the laws, the rules are negatively impacting people of color. And this was the strategy that's being carried on today. So with these champions to my left, we are hoping that we can make some changes and put Hawaii at the forefront of cannabis, because as a global commodity, it's in its infancy. And we can be a leader with the proper legislation. And we can be the leader with the proper legislation that can elevate everyone. We don't want this just for the wealthy and the rich. We want this for the working class, for the small farmer, for the legacy grower. So that that person who might want to do a home invasion or steal your car might decide he can grow some cannabis. And that can be the difference on whether people in Hawaii stay or have to move away. It is a quality of life issue. So, what I want to do today is just hear their thoughts on hemp, medical cannabis, and then I'm sure the bulk of the discussion will be the legalization efforts. And since he is the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, I'd like to ask Cedric Gates, do you have anything, sir, on hemp here in Hawaii and hemp discussion and how it can go forward? In 2018, the federal government passed the Farmers Act, but hemp hasn't really taken off like many people have wanted it to, but there are still many people who want to grow hemp in Hawaii. Representative Gates?
Thank you for the question. So last year, I worked with our Dee Morikawa, my colleague, on hemp and trying to really flesh out the issues with growing the hemp industry, whether it's the testing regulations, whether it was the inspections, all of those different pieces that the Hemp Association and those in the hemp industry came to us and asked us to address. So we passed Act 263, which is the Hemp Omnibus Bill, and that includes all of the requests that were brought forth by the advocates. That includes the testing, lowering the testing issues, and dealing with hemp as fiber and as all of the other things it can be rather than CBD, which is where I think the AG is going with this cannabis bill that we have right now. It's looking at it in a more stringent way of CBD rather than what it actually is in terms of all of the different properties it can provide for us. So on the hemp side, I think that we have to work with all of the advocates right now, because moving into the cannabis bill, the HB 2600, we're trying to include hemp into the bill. So we need to flesh out some of the concerns, which Rep. Tarnas and I met with the Hemp Association, with the Department of Agriculture, with all of the advocates to try to see where they're coming from. And we took that back, and we're going to offer some amendments to try to create a better bill with HB 2600 for him.
Thank you, Representative. And as many of you know, you've heard of hempcrete. And hempcrete is a possible way of building affordable housing in Hawaii. And let me ask Senator, do you think the state would have an interest in supporting and assisting the funding of a hemp processing plant in Hawaii? Because that's a big issue on what do you do with the hemp. You could grow it, but what do you do with it once it's grown?
Okay, so thank you very much for the question, but I'd like to also point out the Senate had an informational briefing 2 days ago regarding hemp, and we had the Attorney General, and that's on YouTube, by the way. So I want to make sure, because I'm wearing hemp, okay, so I do support hemp, that basically industrial hemp is not going to be regulated. That was made sure by the Attorney General at the informational briefing. Watch it on YouTube. You could see them testify to that. So for those hemp farmers who are concerned, we are not regulating industrial hemp. Okay, and as Representative Gates has pointed out, it's not just CBD, but hemp oil. And the reality is, if you look at the state regs, we are supposed to already be regulating that. The idea is to use the existing regs and to move it into one authority. So it's not supposed to be any different. Okay, so the concerns that people are seeing or hearing are not brought out by the bill. And by the way, the SB 3335, which is sort of the companion of HB 2600, we're going to hear it on February 13th at 9 a.m. in the morning at the state capitol. So look that up, submit your testimony, because we hope to be able to pass it this session, and hopefully we'll be able to flesh it out by the time House gets to it. And it's already an SB1, so we already put in some of the concerns of the hemp farmers in there. We've already put in also an expungement provision, which wasn't there. Okay, so we wanted to make sure that it is as robust as what we wanted it to be when Representative Tarnas and I went with the AG to Massachusetts to really work out the kind of cannabis bill that comes out. Regarding the hemp creep, you know, we do want to help the farmers, and so it's same thing with I'm sorry, the ADC.
Agricultural Development Corporation.
Yes.
ADC.
Yes. So over on the Big Island, we've already helped some of the farmers regarding breadfruit. Okay, creating a processing plant, and of course, the more robust the hemp industry becomes, Hawaii will also be in the forefront, because like everybody here, we want to make sure that local farmers are protected. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Tarnas or Representative Belatti, would you like to add anything on him? There are other questions, but I just
Yeah,
to get your
let's
input.
keep going.
Okay, great. So hemp is moving. Its viability and whether commercially can really make it here, I think it's still an open question. So we'll see what happens there. Now, as was mentioned, in the year 2000, Hawaii was the first legislature to pass a medical cannabis bill, and that was actually my first year in the legislature. But after that, nothing happened. And let me give you a little historical footnote. Senator Chun Oakland was the only one who introduced that bill by request, which means it wasn't her idea. Someone asked her, and you could see how things have changed, the last 24 years. By request means it's not my bill, guys, but someone asked me, and I'm going to introduce it for you. Okay. In the Senate, at the midpoint, that bill passed the Senate 13-12. It was that close. It almost died. And then ultimately, the Senate went and passed it 15-10, and the House supported it, but it was 30-20 with 20 no votes. That was the year 2000. 2015 came. Representative Suki from Maui introduced the bill. Representative Bellati, Representative San Buenaventura, both supported that bill, and they were co-introducers in 2015. And that was the medical cannabis bill. And again, little historical footnote. At the end of session in 2015, the medical cannabis bill died. I was the vice president at the Senate at that time, and I was also chair of the Public Safety, Intergovernmental, and Military Affairs Committee. And after speaking with Senator Kim, who was the Senate president, and the Speaker, Suki, we attempted to resurrect the bill. We weren't able to resurrect the bill, and it wasn't a perfect bill, but it was a beginning of our medical cannabis dispensaries. So, Senator Bellati, would you like to begin with a few words on medical cannabis and what's happening there.
Sure. First, I'd like to thank you for promoting me to a Senate, but I am a state representative, and I continue to be a state representative. I've been a representative for 18 years. I'm going to go into a little bit more history than what Senator did, and it's because about 9 years ago, I was not wearing reading glasses. Now I have to wear them to read anything. And it really speaks to how this topic has really traveled through the legislature. I want to actually go back 2 years before 2015 when we introduced the cannabis bill, because really there was two critical things that happened. One quiet thing that happened in 2013, and that's when Speaker Suki first assumed being Speaker in the House. One of the biggest and most critical changes we passed in 2013, and I don't know if any of you remember it, some of you might, the program used to be regulated by the Department of Public Safety. We made one small change, and we said that qualifying patients and caregivers would have to be registered no longer by the Department of Public Safety, but by the Department of Health. I want to say that again. We moved it from the Department of Public Safety to the Department of Health. That reflects a sea change that happened not just within our state, but across the nation. And I think that's one of the things that's really pushing that, and that's why I'm here as the health chair, is that I've always looked at this from the perspective of health. And so we have long known that there are health benefits to cannabis. But we also know that there are dangerous effects. That's for minors, there is issues that we cannot ignore as a community. I will say the second thing that happened before 2015, and this is where you all are involved. In order for us to even get the cannabis dispensary bill, one of the things, and Joy will remember this, David and Cedric were not here yet, I don't think, but one of the things that we did was we did a statewide tour, essentially. During the interim, we had a task force that engaged stakeholders from all over the community, including people from law enforcement, from medicine, from industry, from patients, you name it, they were there. And we took this group around the state and talked with folks and got input on what the dispensary bill would look like. That was really critical because I think that speaks to the role that the community plays in this topic. I will say, fast forward, we were successful, and I know that the dispensary bill is not perfect for everybody. We did not get it right. No state, I want to say that again, no state has gotten it right when we've transitioned from a purely individual grow into a situation where there's more commercially produced. It's just difficult. It's hard. We have competing federal regulations, competing state regulations, and we have patients who just need it. So I will say that as we moved into this session and into what I would call maybe the third phase of this topic, it really speaks to the fact that the House has 3 people here. No offense, Senator, but really the House spent a lot of time this session looking at it from various perspectives. I continue to only look at it from the health perspective. So there are bills moving through this legislative session where I will be holding the Department of Health accountable to doing some of the things that need to still be done on the health and on the patient side. As the conversation continues, and this is where I will throw my baton, or pass the baton to Representative Tarnas and Representative Gates, I will continue to look at it from the health perspective, but it's going to be on them to really ask the questions about agriculture. You know, how does this intersect with hemp? Or the judicial questions that Representative Tarnas is looking at. I will also say that something that reflects what happened in 2015 that's different and that's very encouraging is that we now have an executive partner who is engaged in the conversation. And I want to leave that for maybe Representative Tarnas and Senator to talk about because they have really actually been engaged with the Attorney General. So my comment, I guess, is that there's still a lot of work to be done in the medical side of it. One thing, as this conversation continues both in the legislature and in the community about whether or not we go to adult use, I will continue to look at it from the perspective of the patient. And one of the things, for example, that I'm really concerned about, that we've seen in other states, is that as states move to recreational, the medical patients get left behind. And we cannot forget that, for me, some of the most important people that we're fighting for are those kids with epilepsy and those kids who need the high, I'm going to say it wrong, but the RSO. Right? They need the high dosage, and they're not going to be able to fall under the thresholds that possibly are going to be held for the recreational side. We have to maintain access to the medicine. And so that's how I contribute to this conversation. And I'm really thinking that this is going to be a pivotal year to have these kinds of really tough conversations. And for the House, it's going to be happening across 3 different committees, potentially even 4, because then we have to look at what the fiscal aspects of cannabis. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. I do have a short question with probably just a short answer. Regarding medical cannabis, recently a co-op, a collective, a cooperative on the North Shore was raided by the feds, and they were shut down. And they were providing medicine to, from what I know, 985 patients at that time. Do any of you representatives, senators, feel that there might be a place for collectives or cooperatives like this in the future in the medical cannabis program?
I can take it. Do you want me to take
Sure,
it?
go ahead.
Okay, so I recall in the bill that we wrote for the dispensaries that we did in fact have language about cooperatives and collectives. But when I went back and looked at the medical cannabis dispensary law now, that language is no longer there. So what I'm thinking was that it was in the preamble. And so one of the conversations we've been having is that, yes, in other states, co-ops and collectives are recognized. And we should recognize them if they have the legal standing to be recognized. I think one of the things that we have to work with is the Department of Health sometimes constricts their authority and sometimes expands their authority depending on their own thinking about what's good for the community. So an example of that is and this is a little bit far afield, but I'm telling you this because I want you to understand how we need to work with the Department of Health. There's a law currently being, there's a bill currently being advanced that's going to demand the Department of Health to write rules on pre-rolled cannabis products that the legislature last year approved. The Department of Health has been stalling on that, and it's because of I believe it's their bias against really cigarettes. And we know that there's a problem with smoking. We know that smoking is one way to ingest the medicine, but it's not the only way, and it might not be the best way. So I think one of the things that we have to do is where we see these instances where the Department of Health may not be fulfilling its obligations, we need to write back into the law those things that need to be there. But I will say honestly right now when I look through this, and Senator, maybe you can correct me, I don't think there's actually language for the Department of Health to regulate collectives or cooperatives, even though it was the intent of the legislature in 2015 to permit those things. And so that's why we are in the bind that we're in currently.
Okay, so thank you about that. Those of you who have followed my legislation know that I've introduced soon after we passed this a bill specifically to allow for co-ops. That didn't go very far. Okay, so one of the bills, in fact, that's this session that was carried over from last session, but it really shows the progress we have done since 2015, is to remove the caregiver deadline. Okay, which we really, I've been chomping at the bit to try to get that removed. So there's 2 bills up this session. One just delays it for another 2 years. The other one, which is surprisingly Department of Health introduced to actually eliminate the caregiver deadline, because it has been shown the past 8 years that caregivers is not the pathway to illicit drugs that the Attorney General was concerned about. And Representative Bellatti, myself, and former Senator Espero knows that at the time when we were crafting or trying to get past the dispensary bill back in 2015, it was like hitting ourselves. We kept battling with the Attorney General. I mean, that's why it's so restrictive now. We needed to have some kind of dispensary bill passed, and the only way we could get it past the Attorney General, which we needed to, because otherwise the governor would have vetoed it, like my civil asset forfeiture bill 2 years later, he vetoed even. So we needed to get the AG on our side. So but what some of the progress, that's the reason why we have the SB 3335, the HB 2600. to take it out of the Department of Health into its own cannabis authority. Okay, because we know, one, Department of Health, well-meaning as they are, they have a bias. Two, that they have had long-term vacancies for a very long time, so they really, as anybody in the dispensary, hemp industry and the like, well, hemp is ag, knows that we are so far behind with testing and just keeping up with the science because we don't have enough staff. But hopefully that's it. But I do want to say that there has been progress. When I walked around there in the expo, I noticed that seeds are for sale now. And that was one of my bills, right? Because when we kept going, when all of the things that we discussed off that topic goes, we have to do a don't ask, don't tell, because the AG kept refusing to sell, to have people sell seeds. So how are people going to grow without being able to legitimately buy seeds, right? So I'm glad that it's finally there. The other thing that I'm really glad that even Governor Ige signed into law that I see that's out there, there is no artificial tobacco use anymore, is my drug paraphernalia bill that we decriminalize. So we are yes, it's not perfect, but we're progressing. My co-op bill was because hopefully it'll pass, but part of that, we need to get rid of the caregiver deadline because it doesn't make sense to have a caregiver deadline and have co-ops, right? But,
Thank you, Senator.
If you like caregiver deadline.
oh, caregivers will not be allowed after December 31, 2024 for growing for patients.
Huh?
That's right.
Sounds like
That's
they
a
don't know.
care. That is the caregiver deadline that I've been fighting for many years. So there are two bills. One just delays it. The other one gets rid of it altogether. So even if the HB 2600 or SB 3335 doesn't pass, hopefully this one bill that gets rid of the caregiver deadline passes.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And again, depending on what happens this year with the legalization efforts, that may or may not be relevant. But it's always good to have caregivers. Now, in 2019, the legislature passed HB 1383, and that was the decriminalization bill. And three of our panelists, Representative Tarnas, Representative Gates, and then Representative San Buenaventura, were co-introducers of that legislation. And that was 2019. And in 2023, last year, the Senate did pass a legalization bill, and Senator San Buenaventura was one of the co-introducers with that. But unfortunately, the bill stalled in the House, which brings us to today. And in my opinion, this year is as good as any year where we might have a chance of getting something passed. I do believe that the polls show that the majority of the residents of Hawaii support some type of legalization bill with the proper protections for our children and others. But there is still an amount of opposition from law enforcement, from conservatives, and from people who have never tried cannabis. So, with that, we have, as you heard, two bills, Senate Bill 3335 in play and HB 2600. And the primary introducer of that bill is Representative David Tarnas. And Representative, why don't you start this discussion on legalization? I'm sure there's a lot of interest in this room on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. My name is David Tarnas. I served in the State House from 1994 to 1998 and was very much involved in efforts back then to legalize industrial hemp, medical cannabis, as well as legalizing adult use of cannabis. So I've been at this about 30 years as an elected official. There has certainly been a change in public attitude over those 30 years. And I think it's very important that we address this in a comprehensive way. Last year, Senate Bill 669 came over to the House, and it passed 22-3 out of the Senate. So there's obviously very strong support. But the bill had a lot of unanswered policy areas that basically left it up to rulemaking of the authority to be able to develop that. And in the House, there was great skepticism about that. They wanted to be able to address these issues in statute. And there was a sense of responsibility. We had to address this issue. We didn't want to leave it up to someone who was not elected to come up with these various rules and policies that were very important. So I committed at the time that rather than hear Senate Bill 669 and try to modify it to address all these issues, that I would work over the interim to look at best practices in other states and try to figure out what would be the best way for us to address all of these issues in a more comprehensive bill in the legislature. When the Attorney General was being interviewed for confirmation in the Senate, senators, and I think Senator Sam Buenaventura could tell you the story of what actually happened in the hearing. But suffice it to say that the Attorney General committed to taking the lead on behalf of the administration to do the work, to do the research, to come up with best practices from other states and make a recommendation as to what would be the best bill if the legislature decided to move forward to legalize adult use of cannabis. What would be the best way to do it? She was very clear. She said, I'm not recommending that you do it, but if you were to do it, recognizing the change in political attitude, public attitude, here's what we would recommend. So the Senate said, good, we're going to hold you to it. So over the interim, after last session, I, on behalf of the House, worked with the Attorney General and with Senators Keohokalole and Senator San Buenaventura, also with the Department of Health, and we looked at all different places around the country. What was working well? What wasn't working well? How do we do this? I polled the members of the House saying, what are the priorities? What are the things that should be in this bill? So there was a draft bill that the Attorney General, after all this work, and we traveled together to Massachusetts to look at their model over there. We looked at other states as well. The initial bill that was introduced and it was modified after input from a variety of stakeholders, in my opinion, the bill that I introduced, which is the one that was produced by the Attorney General and submitted to the House and Senate, in many ways, the bill accomplishes the goals that I had moving into this whole discussion. I wanted to transition to a more horizontal business model as opposed to having it be only vertically integrated from production to processing to retail distribution. I wanted it to be more horizontal, so there's more opportunity for small businesses in Hawaii to take part in this new industry. And I was also very pleased that there was a prioritization for disadvantaged communities and people who have been disproportionately affected negatively by the war on drugs. We need, and there's a variety of different ways that that's done in the bill. I was also pleased about the emphasis upon public education, especially for minors. I was pleased about the prioritization of medical use patients so that they are not overrun by the adult use market. These are very important measures. I appreciated that the bill also emphasized social equity applicants to the new adult use market. This is another way that we can make up for the trouble that was caused by the war on drugs, is those who were disproportionately affected, how can they actually enter the market? And that includes legacy growers. It includes those who have a record because they had been incarcerated, many for cannabis-related offenses. And so that's a number of different ways to assist them, whether through business advice, through equity, actual cash to assist and try to get these folks up and running, how to do all the paperwork, how to run a business where you're paying taxes instead of running a business where you're just trying to hide, how to do business so you're not just operating in the unregulated market, but how do you operate in the regulated market? We need to figure out how to attract the legacy growers into the regulated market. And so that's why I think it was very important for us to have a robust authority that prioritizes the inclusion of these legacy growers and also assist those who had a negative impact from the war on drugs in the past. I think also that I'm very pleased to see that the medical cannabis program continues to get the attention it deserves, and the expansion of the licenses to include craft cannabis and processors are very important steps. I think those are important things for us to be looking at. I also appreciate that the proposal that the authority would have the ability to create additional licenses for consumption lounges and special events that would allow the industry to expand once it's operational. I think it's important that we understand that there's a lot of concern that if we were to legalize adult use of cannabis, there would be an increase in use by the youth. Data from other states has shown that's not the case, but it's still a very serious concern. And there's many representatives that are emphasizing that as a reason for opposing the bill itself. So I believe that a strong educational campaign is necessary, but it has to include, I believe, programs where we are reinvesting into those communities that have been negatively affected by the war on drugs to assist in standing up more programs for youth activities and opportunities for maker spaces. The reason why the youth and kids would want to try to access cannabis products is because they aren't as occupied to do other things that we really need to provide them opportunity to be occupied with. Things that are exciting, are motivating, gives them some sense of hope in their own future. I think it's important that we have reinvestment of some of these revenues coming from this industry into those communities, specifically for community programs and for the youth. I have many suggestions about the draft bill as it was introduced. My name is on it as the first primary introducer. Many others signed on to the bill, and I appreciate that they did that. But there needs to be some changes to the bill. I think that we need to strengthen the expungement components of the bill. And expungement is so important that I don't want to leave it up to just this bill. And I just want to emphasize that expungement is so important that we shouldn't leave it up to just this bill, the comprehensive legalization bill. So we have a number of other measures, a number of other bills that we're moving forward. In fact, we've got a hearing on several of them next Tuesday where we're trying to have the state establish a state-initiated process to expunge records of those who have had arrests or convictions pursuant to HRS 712-1249. That was the bill we passed some years ago to decriminalize small amounts of cannabis, 3 grams or less. There are people with records that are no longer really one that would ever happen again because we did decriminalize that small amount. So we need to be able to expunge those records. It's not well set up in the state to do expungement. It's a complicated process. We don't have good data sets to allow us to do that, and so we need to improve that. And so we have a bill just to focus on that. We have another bill that actually is much broader. It's called a clean slate bill, where we're expanding eligibility and automating expungement of a variety of different convictions if certain criteria are met. So we need to move forward on improving the state's means of doing expungement across the board. I also want to emphasize that I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket with just this one legalization bill, HB 2600. But I also am, we've introduced another bill, HB 1596, that exempts drug paraphernalia for cannabis from penalties, and it makes possession of less than an ounce of cannabis a non-jailable violation, punishable only by a fine of $25. This is expanding the decriminalization law that we have on the books, which is just 3 grams, and we're expanding it up to an ounce. So anything less than an ounce would be decriminalized. So I'm trying to move forward on a variety of different measures. We're trying to destigmatize cannabis. But I got to tell you, while the Senate has 22 votes that are up, at least as of last time,
23.
Well,
Only
23. The House is not the same. Out of 51, I have barely a majority that would support this. The House tends to be more socially conservative. I mean, I'm a gray-haired guy, but there are young members of the House, much younger than I, who are opposed to it, and they have concerns. They have concerns about, are we going to see an increase in impaired driving? Are we going to see an increase in use by our youth? The prosecuting attorney of City and County of Honolulu is adamantly opposed to this, and he's organizing major meetings and using his own resources and city resources to spread his gospel of prohibition. And he's bringing in this group, SAM, Smart Approaches for Marijuana, which is really a prohibitionist group. And I think it's really not accurate in terms of the information that they present, and the conclusions that they present as fact aren't actually accurate. So I would encourage all of us, myself included, be engaged in these conversations. Speak professionally, use data, and be able to bring arguments to the table that support legalization of adult use of cannabis. I think we really need to engage in a professional way, focus on the policy, attack inaccuracies and misinformation. Don't attack people. It doesn't help if we demonize it doesn't help if we demonize those who disagree with this. If it's okay to disagree, but let's not be disagreeable. But we need to focus on the facts. And so I would urge all of you, and I know there's a number of folks out there from different organizations that have been very outspoken about it, and I acknowledge that, from the ACLU to the Harm Reduction Center to numerous groups, the Marijuana Policy Project, LEAP, the Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. There's a number of groups and individual professionals that have spoken up. There have been articles in the newspaper, columns in the paper where they're presenting the facts. And I think that's what I think we all need to encourage, that we be reasonable about this debate and move forward. We have a challenge. Like I say, we barely have the majority to move it out of the House. But we have 4 committees to which this bill is referred: Agriculture, Judiciary, Consumer Protection and Commerce, and Finance. In my mind, I mean, I closely work with Chair Bellati because it is a health issue as well. Because we are proposing in this new Cannabis Authority that this Cannabis Authority would regulate all things cannabis. And so it does include medical cannabis. It does include aspects of hemp. It does include adult use of cannabis. Notice I don't call it recreational use, I call it adult use, because there are many of those who would have access to this who don't want to get their medical cannabis card, but they use it for medication. So rather than calling it just recreational, I specifically call it adult use of cannabis. And this is for 21-year-olds older. Yeah, and so that's where we have to focus. Let's be reasonable. I ask all of you to be engaged. Come to these meetings. Show up at the prosecuting attorney's meeting. I mean, he's got it coming up this next week, and I would urge you to show up and don't yell at him, but just tell him that here's the facts, that we don't agree with you on these things, and here's what you need to pay attention to. See that it's at February 7th at 1 p.m. at Mission Memorial Auditorium. February 7th, 1 p.m. Mission Memorial. He's trying to frame this as saying, listen, if we pass this, it'll change the character of Hawaii forever. He says, get the message out that legalizing marijuana will be bad for our keiki and our people. I mean, it's right out of the scare tactics of years ago. And I said to Prosecuting Attorney Alm, I said, I disagree with you, but I will remain engaged with you in a conversation so we can go forward to meet the needs of the state. The people of this state really would like us to address this issue. So let's use facts to address this issue. Let's be responsible as policymakers, and let's move forward to do what's best for the state of Hawaii. So that's my approach.
Thank you, Representative. Now, if I may ask a a direct question, and the answer could be yes, no, or undecided. Would the lawmakers here support homegrown cannabis?
Well, we are in the bill. It's in the bill. It does allow for individuals to be able to grow at home. So
No, I understand that, but would you support it? Because as you said,
I just said I support the bill. I support that component of the bill that includes the ability for individuals to grow cannabis at home for personal consumption.
excellent, excellent.
Well, and there's also a component of the bill to allow caregivers to be able to grow for individuals. And we passed out the bill just last week, I think, which repealed the sunset date that Senator Buenaventura had referred to, that is on the books, that says that caregivers cannot grow after a certain date. So we just passed a bill out of Judiciary Committee that repealed that sunset date.
But they're still trying
Now, we'll have some Q&A, but let me just, the federal government is looking at rescheduling cannabis, right? Because right now it's Schedule 1 with heroin and cocaine. Could I guess that the legislature may pass a resolution in support of those efforts of rescheduling, if you haven't already?
Yeah, we passed the resolution to be scheduled.
Right, I mean, but
So I guess the answer is yes.
it's coming, yes.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, now, yeah, at this stage, I'd like to give each lawmaker a few minutes to say anything they want about cannabis that has either been brought up or not brought up. And then following that, we'll have some Q&A. You want to start, Representative Belatti?
Sure, I'll just start on what you folks left off of. I think the movement at the national level bears close watching, because if there is a descheduling, and depending on what they deschedule to, it has implications for the states that have medical programs. And that's one of the things that's really concerning to me, because if it's descheduled, that means there's now federal regulations that are going to be in conflict with state medical regulations. And so it just introduces a whole nother can of worms. And so that's why I think some of this should and needs to be done more expeditiously, both at state levels and at the national levels. And whatever happens at the national levels, I hope that our legislative leaders there are looking at how they're going to protect the states with medical programs, because they can themselves carve into the Uniform Controlled Substances Act carve-outs for medical states. But I don't know if they're watching that. And so that's something that we have no control over. We state legislatures don't have control over. So that's what's driving some of this conversation happening at all levels.
Thank you. Representative Gates?
Thank you for putting this. Oh, that's you.
Hello? All right. So I think we've been having great conversations about what the future looks like for cannabis. Just a little background on me. I'm born and raised in Makaha. So I know the realities that exist out there. And it feels sometimes that the legislature turns a blind eye to the realities that exist. And for me, that's been my biggest point of pushing cannabis is the issues that exist are already there, whether it's the CBD guy selling at a kiosk in Waikiki or all of these other opportunities people are taking advantage of selling these type of products to youth even, and also to our broad community without proper testing regulations and oversight that puts the end consumer at risk. And for me, that's where we are needing to lead the conversation. It's at the end of the day, the consumer will have the best product, will probably have the best price points, will be able to access it safely and not have to go to a guy on the street that then will offer you all the other drugs that exist out there. And that's the reality that I know exists. So trying to shape that narrative around how do we actually just put something together that will create a win-win situation for the people who are concerned, whether it's about the kids' access or driving under the influence. All of those things can be addressed through regulations. And because we don't have any real regulations on adult use cannabis, this market continues to grow. And also, could be definitely a contributing factor to the crime that is occurring in our community. You have people who are selling drugs not for medicine but for profits. And those guys are also investing in other things that are happening in the community as well. So I also believe that with the risk of federal regulations coming down before the state puts state regulations and a framework in place, that we're doing a disservice to our population here as residents, to be able to access the market, to be able to be entrepreneurs, to be able to create wealth for themselves. Given that we have the highest cost of living, we need other economic opportunities. And you hear from a lot of people who have the expertise in cannabis moving to Colorado, moving to all of these Oregon states, all of these other legalizations to apply their skills to get paid. And then they're wanting to be here in Hawaii, but they aren't able to create a job for themselves and create a life for their family. And I think that's one of the big issues that I think we can address through proper regulation. I do want to just express my gratitude to all of the folks I'm sitting here with, because they are definitely paving the way, and Rep. Tarnas has definitely kept me engaged in the conversations with the AG and all the other things that's been happening. So, like I said, my last point I'll leave it off on is that Rep. Tarnas touched on this. We as advocates and as people who have interest in this need to mobilize seriously. You can't just say you support it and put a Facebook post up saying you support it. You got to show up and show out and really make your voices heard, because also those people that are on the fence, that our colleagues who are more on the conservative side or have conservative districts, if they're not hearing your voice, hearing the realities that are taking place in the community, they will never know, and they won't have that perspective that I think needs to be brought to the conversation. Last point I'll make is that it's a medicinal product that can really help address depression, anxiety, all of the things that community members struggle with, because it's a hard living in Hawaii, and I recognize that. So I just am appreciative of all of the work that's being done here, all the advocates that showed up today, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Senator Buenaventura.
Aloha. So I represent Puna, and those of you who know Puna, a number of my constituents have been harmed by the war of drugs. And so that's the reason I have been in the forefront ever since I've been elected, into trying to get legalization through. And I'd like to also point out a couple of things. One is Representative Tarnas is correct. When I questioned the Attorney General during her nomination, and her answer made the front page that she would work with us, to help craft a bill, there was a lot of pressure on her because of that front page article that quoted her, which means that's the reason why we have this adult use bill the way it's drafted. It is super pro-low enforcement compared to what it could have been. So there's a lot of pressure on the governor, even though he campaigned for dual use. And there's a lot of pressure on lawmakers. This is an election year. So, right. So what I'm saying is, what Representative Tarnas is saying is, you need to show, and the same thing with Representative Gates, you need to show. You need to be able to let your voices be heard. Because otherwise, although the Senate, voted 23 to 25 in favor of adult use, it may not be there because of the mounting pressure from all of this. Okay, so please be there. Second thing I'd like to point out is the federal government, when I start seeing like Forbes magazine actually talking about rescheduling to Schedule 3, we're starting to think about big pharma coming in, right? And that's the reason why we really need to have an adult use. Because even though we do want it to be medicinal, if big pharma comes in, there's gonna be huge restrictions on the medicinal use of it. And all of the medicinal regulations we put in is gonna go out the door in favor of the FDA. So that's one of the reasons, even if you're only pro-medicine only, that we need to push for adult use. Because if And I know, I see a lot of people shaking their heads, but I'm, okay, well, you folks know what happened with the FDA. You folks know what happens with big pharma. So that's what I'm concerned about. That's why we're pushing for adult use. I don't know whether or not it's going to happen this year. Okay, but those are the things. But the good thing about, I hate to say, about Fed regs is that hopefully the restriction that we've been pushing for that never seems to pass the state legislature, that prevents employers from discriminating against those who use it for medicinal purposes. If it becomes Schedule 3, they're not going to be able to do that because they're going to admit to that. So, you know, it's good and bad, but we do need to have a dual use system in place. So aloha and please have your voices be heard.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Tarnas?
Fundamentally, I think this is a consumer protection bill. It's going to allow consumers to be able to purchase something that they can depend on as being the quality product that they're paying for. It doesn't have any contaminants in it. It's actually got the potency that they're expecting to purchase. And I think that's really fundamentally what we're after here. And I really do want to make sure that we have opportunities for local small businesses to be able to participate in this new industry and that it doesn't get taken over by very wealthy companies, well-funded companies that are based on the continent coming in and sort of taking over everything. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I want to allow for craft growers. I appreciate that. You don't have to yell. It's okay. I appreciate that this is I know you really want to speak. I understand that you believe it's already here, but it's okay. You don't have to interrupt and just say that this is that. So now my final point is I want to acknowledge those who are speaking up, who are organizations that are trying to inject really good, well thought out arguments here. That includes the Marijuana Policy Project. It includes the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, Doctors for Cannabis Regulation, the American Civil Liberties Union, Drug Policy Forum, and the Last Prisoner Project. These are organizations that are stepping up and really putting out their statements that are based on fact to try to get through a lot of the misinformation that opponents are bringing forward. And I urge all of you to learn the facts and use them in your arguments and participate in the process. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now, for Candace, are you okay with 10 minutes or so of Q&A? If you'd like to hear from
I'm okay with
what the public has to say. So, okay. Let's do this in a civilized manner, please. Why don't we start, if you could stand up and say your question, sir.
Aloha. Mahalo for your positive words about protecting the medical program and supporting local farmers. I do appreciate that. I am a farmer myself on Kauai, and I'm an active community member in the farming community on Kauai. And I just had some thoughts and some questions about how we could do this right. And main thing, like, I've seen a lot of limitations in all of these bills that are being introduced. There are limitations on us, the farmers, being able to grow food and medicine for our own community. And we don't need brick and mortar. We don't need a retail.
Is there a specific question where?
Okay, so
specific question.
Okay, the caregiver sunset. I appreciate that you're trying to remove that, but we need to allow caregivers to caregive for more than just one other patient. Right? If a person cannot feed themselves and cook for themselves, it would be like having a private chef cook for that person only and nobody else. And if we want to talk about farmers and people who actually have the ability and the space and the land and the privacy to do it, we need to allow them to do it without these limitations on, only so many plants or only so many patients. There needs to be, I understand there needs to be limitations on residential zone properties. We cannot have huge, grow operations in residential areas, but let farmers farm on ag land, please. Ag zone properties, no limitations. Please have exemptions so that farmers can farm and farmers can farm together, because farming alone is so depressing and it's so difficult. No farmer should be farming alone. And if you really truly support farmers, let us farm together because many hands make light work. And Hawaii is built on agriculture. Before the plantations even. So,
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. So again, I appreciate the comments. Remember, you could reach out to any of these members through their email, and I'll give you a little secret. reps@capital.hawaii.gov or sends@capital.hawaii.gov goes to every representative and goes to every senator. Okay?
Can we please have the taxes from this and also from tourism subsidize healthcare for us?
Okay. Again, and many of these are part of the bill making, and that's going to be a great opportunity. So we'll go with this lady here, then we'll go over here to Jason. Go ahead, ma'am.
You mean Empress?
Yes. Question, please.
May I introduce myself, please? I not only want to ask questions, I need to introduce myself so that the honorable representatives and the honorable senator from my district in Puna can understand who we are. My name is Empress Olufumi Jacobs. I'm a gun war veteran. I'm also owner of Bomb OG 360 LLC, which is really Bomb of Gilead Cannabis Health and Wellness Ministry. And you already know because of the laws, I can't call my business a cannabis business. But I am, as I said, a ganja war veteran, which are the people who are adversely impacted by your war on drugs called Green Harvest. Now, fast forwarding to your legislation right now, my comment is that all cannabis legislation is grounded and founded on structural and systemic racism. Therefore, this is why all the 40 states now that are legal and 28 are medical. This is why you're having a hard time figuring things out. But for the state of Hawaii specifically, can any of you explain to me why it is that people of African descent are 1.3% of the population here in Hawaii, but yet, compared to whites in the state of Hawaii, because they don't have the statistics for Pacific Islanders being arrested for cannabis possession, but African Americans in Hawaii, and by the way, you asked for facts, this is an ACLU research report.
Question, please.
Okay? I'm coming to the question. Would you permit me, honorable, as I sat here for like 40 minutes listening to you, and you're asking for solutions and you're asking me to be civil, what you're doing there is not that. You're badgering me.
With all due respect, I'm not badgering you. There's a time limit.
Yes, there is, but I believe what I'm saying here, there are many people in here that would benefit from hearing it. This is an educational forum, and permit me. Does anyone have any objections to hearing what I have to say to the honorable members of this legislative body?
I don't have an objection, but they are already addressing communities that have been impacted, so it's not that they're ignoring it.
Oh, excuse me. Have you identified the communities with them that are impacted? Because this is precisely what I'm...
Okay, if I may take control of the Empress, do you have a question for our panelists?
That was a nice...
Can you ask them the question, please,
Yes.
Empress?
In your proposed legislation, right, how do you plan on enforcing your current legislation, specifically for adult use, that conflict with the cultural and spiritual practices of individuals and communities like myself? Because the current laws that you have, those are the laws that currently criminalize and marginalize people like us for practicing our Rastafari way of life.
Good question.
Next question is...
Wait, one question at a time, please. Because we have a room full of people who have questions.
With all due respect, you are the moderator.
Thank you. Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask you one more question, please?
No, right now, one question, please. And you've already asked it. Do we have anyone that would like to answer the law enforcement issue and the biases and the crap that's happened in the
Your
past?
question is about are there restrictions? Are there going to be restrictions on religious use? I think is what I'm understanding. You're saying cultural use, religious use of cannabis.
Not just that.
Well, that's so. I don't. don't think that the bill contemplates any specifics related to religious use or cultural use. But I will certainly go back and look at that.
The social
No,
equity
and
line.
so what the senator wants me to emphasize is something I did bring up earlier, is that those communities that have been disproportionately negatively affected by the drug war, which you pointed out, rightfully so, people of color, that those communities and those individuals would actually have programs that would first expunge their records if they had one, and then secondly would help support them if they choose to get involved in the industry itself by different business support programs that would be supported by this cannabis authority. So I agree, we have to make up for the terrible things that the drug war has caused in our community. I absolutely agree.
Thank you, Representative. And again, time is of the essence, so please understand, we want to try to get as many questions in before these individuals have to leave. And one question per person, please. Jason?
Okay. Hi guys, aloha, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. It's very hard to get everybody in one spot. So my question is pretty simple. We're looking at expunging the caregiver stuff this year, but there's still the 5-card limit. Site that's coming back in, that's supposed to end this year, that would completely wipe out most cooperatives that are operating more than 5 people. As you know, a lot of our large cooperatives, like Hawaii Legislature, are almost 1,000. We're providing a service to try and help people be compassionate, provide the medicine, test the medicine, do all these things, but we're trying to figure out, how to move forward. And we've also introduced the bill, SB 2619, which is a new medical bill that if we can't get any dual use action going on, there's some way we can get these things in place, so at least we're protecting the medical community and moving in a positive way forward as we're looking into what you guys are considering dual use. So a couple of little parting questions there.
Okay. Anyone want to take that one?
Okay, that's Shimabukuro as
Yeah, we didn't have that same bill that you referred to in the House, so I was just asking the senator to refer to it.
Bill, right?
Yeah, I mean, AWA and Change dropped it in as written by the LRB, but it's basically,
No. One of the concerns that we have in the legislature is, one, we want to make sure that whatever it is we pass does not get vetoed. And I'm like the queen of vetoed bills. Okay, I mean, ever since I got into office, to me, the big bills I had that make the front page ends up getting vetoed, like my civil asset forfeiture bill. Gets vetoed by the governor. My first bill to help domestic violence victims got vetoed by the governor. So one of the things it sounds like we're being difficult, but we are really concerned that whatever it is we pass not get vetoed, because we want the good stuff to go through, okay? And we want to really fix, we want to make sure that caregiver deadline dies, okay? And Jason, when you've been in my I've also increased the number of licenses, okay? And I know that there is a limit, and that's because we're concerned that we don't want the DAA to shut down what it is that we have already started. So yes, we want to help out. My community, okay? We want to help out. But we want to
we'll keep the question easy. Are we going to get past this card limit 5 thing this year and push this out sunrise? Or are we going to start enforcing this, because this is going to be a big issue, as even Belatti brought up, right? Yeah. We want to redo the medical program and do this the right way.
We tried to fix it last session, remember?
Yep.
It died in conference because the House did not put in conference.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to work with each other. Okay, so even if the Senate passes it through and throws the ball to the House got to pick up the ball, okay?
Well,
and the governor cannot veto it. Yeah. So that's the problem we're having.
Maybe it's a good question for Representative Belatti, because it's a certain program. We just are really trying to understand a better way forward on this. Cards, medical cards, like everything.
Representative Tarnas mentioned that he had just passed a bill that would repeal the sunset date, and I believe that's House Bill 2443, and I'm the next committee up. So we're going to take it up. But it's a conversation that's going to happen. I haven't looked at the bill yet. So We have our first lateral deadline is in 2 weeks. So I haven't posted a notice yet, but certainly that bill will be noticed in my.
Oh, okay, everybody, listen up now. Now, today we're not going to create bills to tell you what's going to pass or not. They're going to do their best to work with everybody. They're going to do their best to work with everybody. Some people will be happy, some people will not be. But these are your champions, whether you agree with me or not. So with that, I'll let this lady here and then this gentleman with the beard in the front.
Hey, my name is Della. I'm actually from California. I understand I'm mainlander, so please understand I'm chatting very lightly as someone who has been a part of the rulemaking process, but also the technical assistance programs and focusing heavily on restorative justice, social equity, and operating in the legal space for the last decade. So it's really important. I appreciate what you guys said. Also, I understand everyone's frustrated. I haven't seen any of these situations go down without everyone being angry. It happens. I agree with the respect thing. But making sure when we look at social equity programs, a lot of those that I work with, you have these robust rules, right? A social equity applicant needs to own X amount of the license and things like that. But there's no forethought into how you protect them once those licenses are issued. How do you guys intend to protect not only your social equity applicants to prevent things like tokenism and saying someone qualifies, I as a rich person or a corporation are going to come in and take over what you've gotten because I'm using you as my token flagship for my application, but also to make sure we're protecting the native Hawaiians because you guys have that piece which is really important as well.
We'd like to say rest in peace, Reverend Wally Bachman, who started all of this, suing Attorney General Price in 1976. According to now expired Professor Pianaya of Geography Department of University of Hawaii, Ahupua'a, Hawaiian is 9% African American.
Thank you, sir. Was that your comment or question? So we don't have to come back to you.
Rest in peace, Reverend Bachman.
So did anyone want to address the woman's issue?
I absolutely agree with you. I mean, we need to make sure that there isn't this tokenism where someone is just being used to be able as a cover for a continental-based investment banking firm that's coming in to just try to do it. So we have to make sure it's authentic, and how we go about doing that. I'd be interested in your suggestions. So please let me know afterward. Please send me an email and let me know what you think from your experience, and maybe the senator might want to add on to it.
What I'd like to point out is when we passed the dispensary bill way back in 2015, that was our concern too, okay? And the reality was, despite having panels to go look at each of the license applications, what it ended up happening was, I remember on the Big Island when I wanted to go check out these dispensary licensees, and at least one of them, I felt was a token. Okay.
All of that.
So,
especially facts. Especially. Facts.
So we're doing our best.
A failed meddling program.
Okay, everyone.
I got a quick question. So, for Senator Della, if we spent just as much time trying to get tampons and male bathrooms as you guys spend on the cannabis, I think we'd get somewhere. Spend more time trying to get tampons.
Okay. Miley, do you have a?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I have some concerns about the enforcement of this bill. We see a lot of funding for HPD, but one of my bigger concerns is with the driving and the testing for impairment. Because we have so many people who use cannabis medically, they're going to metabolize THC differently. So somebody can completely not be impaired but still have over the 5. And having all of this cost to start this program, to train them, to have HPD doing this, it's going to be incredibly expensive. And I saw your comments, so I would like to hear from you, Tarnas, about that.
Yeah, I agree that the proposed nanogram level is not scientifically based. People can have presence of THC in their system, but they are not impaired. And I think we really need to focus on impaired driving. And this is And it's not just impairment from cannabis. We have to address this issue across the board. What is causing impaired driving that is causing these accidents? And a large part is people who are looking at their phone, texting on their phone, they're distracted. And you know, I appreciate everyone's strong opinions about this. We're regular people doing our job, trying to do our best for the people of Hawaii. So we're trying, excuse me, sir.
Come on, everybody.
So I'm trying,
Please.
I agree with you that we need to make sure that we have a good, scientifically based effort to address impaired driving. And what's in the bill right now is not, it's not something that I accept. We have to work on that.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, 2 more questions, and then if they're here afterwards to speak with you privately, please do. Gentleman with the beard there. One question, please.
Yeah, my name is John Miller. Question concerning our current medical program. I would be the first one to say, if you'd like to disagree with me, I'd love to hear your facts, that we have a completely failed program. Just noticed one outside entities coming in. From the testing to over-regulating, we can't even get an email as a patient letting us know that microbial and moldy yeast are no longer required for dispensaries. But you can't email us because you want to have an email come from the Department of Health targeting a farm on Instagram. Like, it's really confusing as a patient here in the state to understand that our concerns are being met to protect this program and the people that belong to it and the community here when the blatant program has failed and nobody wants to do anything about it. We talk about legal use and get rid of people that actually provide access to affordable medications through cooperatives and caregiver programs. So I think that should be the main point of discussion is how do we correct the already messed up program so it doesn't continue happening over and over again like we've seen in this most corrupt state.
Let me say that real quickly. That the medical cannabis program is run by the executive branch of government. It's not run by these people make the policy, the executive carries it out. And just like anything else, if you've got an executive and or appointees and individuals who understand and are behind you, you can possibly get better results and a better response. But the executive branch and Governor Green is the man you should be talking to in terms of how the Department of... Well, like I said...
I share your frustration about the current programs. I could respond...
Okay.
Representative
Tarnas has an answer.
Briefly, I can respond saying I share your frustration with the current program. It's not been something that the Judiciary Committee has been involved with in the past. This is the first time that the Judiciary Committee has been part of it. I expressed a serious problem that I had with the Department of Health not promulgating rules to implement what the legislature has passed. And so I agree with you. I share your frustration. I'm trying to fix it.
And if HB 2600 and or 3335 passes, this authority and control board is going to be in charge of things. So there is an effort to change the infrastructure within government that's going to operate and run this. And just remember, when this came in, when I was in and others, a lot of people didn't know a lot about cannabis, let alone lawmakers. So it is a learning curve for many of them, but I and these individuals up here understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but there are decisions around.
Well, that's why we have a legislative process and bill. So right here will be our last question, and then I'm sorry, but we do have to end this.
I appreciate you guys. My name is Adam Belatti. I'm actually the owner-operator of Hawaii Legislature Panel. My question is for the new legalization bill that's being presented. It is for homegrown, but it's limiting homegrown the current legalization limits homegrown number of plants for patients.
Correct.
That's never an issue. Why are you limiting it? That's why I want to know the reason behind limiting that and even limiting it for licenses per household too. So why is that?
Well, I think just so everyone understands, the proposal, just so everyone understands, I'm going to respond to that. Just so everyone understands, the proposal that I introduced in the House was what was recommended by the Attorney General, is what their office felt was what they could defend. that they recommend. It's not everything I want either, and I would like to amend it as we consider this. The Senate is already scheduled a hearing on it. I would urge all of you to make specific recommendations, testify and make specific recommendations on that particular issue for home growing operations. What kind of limits, if any, should there be? And that's the opportunity for us to modify the bill. There's going to be a Senate Draft 1, sounds like, that was going to be released so that you could read it and then testify on that. So I didn't understand what you just said, sir, so I'm just responding to your question. Testify, and great. Well, like I say, the Attorney General thought this was the best idea. We don't have to agree with it. Yeah.
Listen, everyone, it's a starting point for discussion, okay? It's not going to pass, probably.
What are you going to do about the corruption? The corporate corruption?
We're going to have you run for office, my friend, and end it off. So,
I take exception to your... Sir, I take exception to your accusation that I am corrupt, because I'm not corrupt. I'm just a regular guy trying...
Okay, everyone, this is getting a little loud now. Let's give these people a hand for coming here. Thank you very much. And if you want to try to talk with them, please do. Thank you, representatives and senators.